So, gross structure of long bone. Today's my topic is gross structure of long bone. In this, you have to see the after the classification, definition of bone, functions of the bone. You have to know the what is the structure of long bone. So, in this structure of long bone, you have to remember there is two components which we are going to get in the gross structure of the bone. First one, as we see the bone, in this bone which consists the two types, that is the compact bone and spongy bone. In this, you have to know the compact bone. When you see that is the slide, you are going to get the compact variety of bone. The first one, which is you are going to see the compact and spongy. When you see the almost all the part shaft of the long bones, in that outermost hard substance, which is we are going to call it in a compact bone, and a sponge-like network, which is we are going to call as that is a spongy. So your network or sponge appearance, that we are going to call in a spongy. So you have to remember the gross structure of long bone consists the outermost one, which is we call as in a compact bone, and that is a hard and dense outer layer of bone which gives desirable strength. That is we are going to call as in a compact bone. Spongy bone, internal network of bone present at the ends or end of bone, that is we call it in a spongy. This spongy, you can see here ends bone, near that it is found, and compact you are going to see here. So this is what you have to remember in the structure of the bone. So after this, you have to know the almost all the parts which are you are going to see in the long bone. Whatever when you see the structure cut section of the bone, in that you can see how the appearance of the compact bone. So almost all you have to remember the compact bone, which you see almost all the compact variety is looks like this way. Outer one thick strength is given, and inside the bone which is near to that, the spongy bone, that you can see in the diagram when we take the section of the total bone. The next, when you see the gross anatomy of the bone, it is very important to bone design, and almost all this is to overcome or to manage the stress. So anatomy of bone reflects stresses, and compression and tension greatest at the external surfaces, so that external surfaces is more, so that you can get the almost all the how the pressure on the bones is transmitted. So you have to know the almost all the reflects the stresses on the bones. Suppose this is a pressure which is created on the bone. Point of no stress is this one. At the it is going down, and compression here at the site here, compression, and tension here are going away. Both the side reflecting tension away, and here compression each other. That you have to remember. And in this, you have to know the almost all the parts, that is the compact variety of bone and cancellous variety of bone. Next, you are going to see the microscopic structure. As we have come across the when interior, we cut the bone and keep under the microscope and see the almost all the structure of the microscopic structure of the compact bone. So now you should understand the whatever the bone is gross structure consists compact and spongy, even cancellous. So whatever the compact is, most bones which you get the desirable strength due to the compact bone, and spongy, the network like sponge like which is towards the ends it is present, that is we call it in a spongy. So these you have to read. When we take the compact bone under the microscope, that gives you the different cells of the bone. We have these cells which are made up of under the microscope. We see osteon, then we have the lacuna. So these are the lacuna, osteon, and this is a central canal that you have to remember in the that is and lamellae. So lamellae, lacuna, osteon, and central canal, they almost all the present. We are going to see the structure under the microscope. When you see the why this bone is very hard, even when you see the cartilage of the bone, that cartilage is very soft. When this cartilage is deposited by the calcium salts, and that gives the desirable strength, and strong strength is due to the calcium deposition on the cartilage, and then it becomes a hard tough, that is a strong bone. Here, chemical composition of the bone, 35% organic components composed of cells, fibers, and organic substances. Then collagen abundant, it is consisting, it is all the 35% organic components. Then next comes about the 65% inorganic mineral salts. Primarily calcium phosphate resists the compression. So calcium phosphate, calcium carbonate, and traces of other elements which we are going to get it. So you are knowing the total, almost all the bones which are strength is due to the organic components and inorganic mineral salts. So inorganic mineral salts, we have the calcium phosphate, calcium carbonate, and traces of other elements which will give the strength, and that is a cartilage or this connective, specialized connective tissue more stronger due to the presence of organic components and inorganic mineral salts. When you see the other parts, that is the comes about the, that is the, when we see the long bone, it consists of the, that is the parts of the long bone. In the long bone, you have to remember, that is the, totally in the long bone, it consists the, we have the first one, that is the epiphysis, then metaphysis and diaphysis. So parts of the young bone we have to deal. The totally I have told the bone which is consist of the that is the young bone consists the epiphysis, diaphysis, and metaphysis. So you have to know the first one, what is the epiphysis. So in this you have to remember epiphysis, which is, you know, the tips and ends of the long bone. Here if it is considered long bone, the tips and ends of the long bone which are
Yes, sir.
ossified by the, you are going to get the, which are ossified by the uh, that is you get the totally. So in this, you have to remember, my intention to cover is the parts of the young bone. So after completion of the gross structure of the long bone, you have to write whatever the outermost, which is covering, you have the periosteum, then compact bone, then we have the, that is the medullary cavity. So in that we have come across the cancellous bone also. So whatever the spongy and cancellous and compact bone in the gross structure of bone. When question is asked, describe the gross structure of bone, you have to write totally compact and spongy bone. Even includes the outer covering surface, that is covering of the bone is periosteum. So almost all include in this. So in this, you have to remember, that is the gross structure of bone consists the following things. In that you have to explain the compact variety of bone and cancellous variety of bone, that you have to explain. So next comes about the, when we take the long bone, in that you have to remember about the, it consists of the parts of the young bone. When bone is developing, when it is not completed its development, it is not completed its ossification, then you have the almost all the parts of the young bone like epiphysis, diaphysis and metaphysis. So here you have to know the epiphysis is a one which is the tips and ends of the long bone is called as an epiphysis, and ossified by the, these all are ossified by the secondary centers of the ossification. Then next comes about the diaphysis, the elongated part of the long bone. That is this part which is elongated part of the diaphysis you are going to get. That is almost all elongated part of the long bone which ossified by primary centers before birth. They are ossifying, those we call as that is a diaphysis. So you have to remember epiphysis, diaphysis. Then metaphysis is this region where you have the epiphyseal end of diaphysis is called as metaphysis, and this is the active zone of that is a growth. Here, from the metaphysis, bone starts developing, growing end of the bone will be, bone grows at the metaphysis. So, metaphyseal plate, unless and until it joins, metaphyseal end joins with epiphyseal plate and epiphysis, till that the metaphysis grows. So that you have the three parts we have to remember. That is one which is you should remember, that is the structure of long bone is asked. You have to tell the compact, cancellous and medullary cavity. So when you see the cut section, longitudinal section of the long bone, this is the innermost cavity which is we call as a medullary cavity, and this medullary cavity consists the bone marrow, and where from the bone marrow the RBCs are produced. Then this is a bone marrow you have to remember about the total that is a structure of the long bone. Parts of the young bone I have told: epiphysis, diaphysis, metaphysis. So what is epiphysis? Epiphysis are the tips and ends of the long bone which ossified by secondary center called as an epiphysis. What is the diaphysis? Diaphysis is the one which is elongated part of the long bone which ossifies by the primary center, and that is the diaphysis. Third one, you have the metaphysis. Epiphyseal end of diaphysis is called as a metaphysis. So this is what, my dear students, you should know about the almost all the in this you have the totally that is the structure of long bone, parts of young bone that you have to come across. Next comes about the that is the, you have to, what is the ossification? That is the bone development, or also we call as an osteogenesis. Osteo means bone, you know. So that ossification or development of bone, or osteogenesis means it is a same as you should remember. What is ossification? Definition of ossification. Ossification means it is defined as, that is a process of bone tissue formation called as a ossification. It is a process of development of bone, or process of development of bone from prenatal to the postnatal. You have different definitions. Prenatal, before birth also bone development is there. Postnatal, after birth also there is a bone growth takes place, development takes place. That process we are going to call as an ossification. So one thing you should clearly understand: osteogenesis, osteo means bone, bone formation, genesis, formation, ossification, it is the process of bone tissue formation, process of development of complete bone is called as an ossification. So it is of the two types of ossification. In total, in a human body, whatever the bone develops, they follow the two types. They are there. we have the membranous ossification, then cartilaginous ossification. Almost all the membrane bones form directly from mesenchyma, bone of the skull, and clavicle. So clavicle and skull bones which are there, they are almost all they are developed from the totally membranous ossification. So you should know the one thing which is that is the what are the types of ossification. First one, membranous ossification and cartilaginous ossification. That all you have to know. Cartilaginous, majority of the bone develop initially from the hyaline cartilage. Endochondral ossification, we call as an endochondral ossification. See his intramembranous ossification, where you have the mesenchyma, collagen fiber, ossification center. These are the where bone starts developing, and this is we call an ossification center, osteoid and osteoblast. So we have the bone forming cell, osteoblast, and we have osteoid, and we have the ossification center here, and collagen fiber. So this is all will be helping to that is the development of bone or bone formation, and that is we are going to call as an ossification. So next comes about the after this you have there is an mesenchymal and periosteal, and we have trabeculae. These all will be starting with the blood vessels where the nutrition is supplied to the part at the ossification center and bone, and that is the bone growth takes place. The next comes about the what are the centers of ossification. You have here the two types of ossification. You have come across definition, two types of ossification. Then next are we have the two types of centers of ossification. In that you have to remember. Here one we get the primary centers of ossification and secondary centers of ossification. Centers of ossification, in this you should know the primary centers of ossification as just I have told, the epiphysis, diaphysis, metaphysis, what is that, and centers of ossification which they are ossified. In that you should know the first one, the primary centers of ossification. The primary centers of ossification appear before birth. I have told prenatal. Before birth, usually during they occur centers bone development usually at the 8th week of intrauterine life. Intrauterine life means inside the uterus the human body is developing. That is we call after embryo, then it goes on, development of embryo takes place. Then 8th week there is a process of formation of bone starts, and by the primary centers, that is we call as a centers, that is a primary centers of ossification, and usually they form the diaphysis. I have already told this diagram. Whatever the osteoblast and osteoclast, we have the osteoblast and center of ossification. I have told you. Then comes about the secondary centers of ossification. In this secondary centers of ossification, the ossification appears after the birth, usually during the puberty, and completed by the age of 25 years of life, after which no more bone growth can take place here. So secondary centers ossification appear after the birth and usually during the puberty and complete by the age of 25 years. So you should remember that is the primary center, almost all before birth, 8th week appearance, 8th week of intrauterine life and forming the diaphysis. Secondary center ossification appear after the birth, usually during the puberty and completed by the age of 25 years. So this is what which is you should know about the centers of ossification. So I have covered the what is the definition of the ossification. Afterwards, I have told the almost all the what are the types of ossification. Then I have covered the centers of the ossification. one most important thing which is you should know all is the law of ossification. What is the law states? Because everything in our body, that is the bones develop, they are forming the according to the, that is the law of ossification. You have the development of bone which is takes place according to the law of ossification. So what law states ossification? The law of ossification states that secondary center of ossification which appears first are last to fuse. Means what? Whatever the upper end, lower end in the long bone, which centers appears first has to fuse last. If it is first appears, first fuses, it is not following the law of ossification. And the end of long bone where epiphyseal fusion is delayed is called as a growing end of bone. If it is delay joining, appearing first, appearing first and last fusing means no problem. If appearing first and fusing first, then it is the not following the law of ossification. So here you should know the one thing, that is the one bone which does not follow the law of ossification. So you have to know the fibula violates the law of ossification. In this fibula, as you know the upper end, lower end and long bone, as it is a upper end which is appearing centers for the upper end, fuses appears late but fuses early because it is a we are going to get the late joining, that is the one which is lower end of the fibula which fuses early, and that is due to the, that is a pressure epiphysis. And upper end which is late fusing of the fibula upper end because it is a growing end of the bone. So growing end of the bone, fibula upper end, lower end is a pressure epiphysis, so that the centers which are appearing in the, that is appears first are not fusing last, so that that is not followed in the fibula. So you have to study the ossification of the fibula. You will understand why it is not following. Two reasons you have to mention. Upper end is growing end and it is fusing late, even though centers of, so that is a, you have the secondary center appearing first, but it is a fusing, that is a first are to appear and last to fuse. So lower end centers appearing and it is not fusing last. So lower end centers appearing first and fusing first, upper end appearing last, and last it is fusing. So that you should know the one bone which does not follow the law of ossification, that is the fibula. So what law states? The secondary center which appears first has to fuse last. Suppose secondary center for the one end appears at the particular age and it has to fuse at the 22 years. And if it is not fusing, so then it is not following the law of ossification. So this is all about the law of ossification. And one bone, I have told fibula violates the law of ossification because you have to tell reason. Upper end is growing end of bone, and second one is, that is the lower end is pressure epiphysis. So it fuses early, and upper end is not fusing early because it is a growing end unless and until growth takes place. Next, you have to tell about the, what is the medical legal importance of the bone. Medical legal importance of the bone you have to know here. In this, you have to know the bone medical legally has the following importance. That is the first one that is a estimation of skeletal age, then estimation of sex, estimation of stature or height, estimation of race. So four medical legal importance of bone you have to remember. First one, estimation of skeletal age. Taking the one bone, or in the aircraft, we get the different bodies and all in the accidents we get, and in the burnt stage bodies get. So what is the age or what is the height, what is the male belongs to the female, and race also can be looking at the bone, we can identify the bone looking at the bone, we can identify the age, sex, stature, and race. How? First one, I have told estimation of the skeletal age. If it is belongs to the middle age or old age, that can be identified by the on the ossified centers and looking at the bone. So you have to remember almost all this is you have to know that is a one which is you are going to get it. So next one which is you should know about the uh, in this, you have to know about the estimation of the skeletal age. As it is, you have the age can be identified if it is old age or middle age or in the children bone, we can identify looking at the bone identification and its features, general features, appearance. Sex, as you know, the bones of the male are solid, very heavy, rough surface area. If they have the smooth area like appearance, lighter, and then we may, they belongs to the bones to the females. Estimation of the stature, femoral length taking totally femoral length we get, we can guess the total length of the body height of the person can be guessed. Estimation of race, it belongs to the different races of the different regions of the world. People are together in the aircraft, different Indian, American, Japanese, Chinese, all different races also we can identify with the bone. So this is one which is you should know about the that is types of bone cells. We have the osteocytes, osteoblasts, and osteoclast. So we have the mature bone cells we call as an that is a osteocytes. Mature bone cells we call as an osteocytes. Then osteoblast, bone forming cells. Now, I have told in the ossification center where the ossification center osteoblasts are there. They are the bone forming cells. Third one, osteoclast. At the old age, uh, bone destroying cells. We are going to call those are the osteoclast. Break down bone matrix for remodeling and release of calcium. So they are the destroying bone destroying cells, osteoclast, bone forming cells, osteoblast, and osteocytes are mature bone cells. We are going to call as that they are the types of the bone cells. Here you have the how they are appears: osteoblast, osteocyte, osteoclast, builds new bones at the fracture sites, new building at the fracture sites, healing of bone takes place in the process where the osteoblast, we are mature bone cells, we are going to get like this, eats the bone where destruction of the bone takes place by the osteoclast. So this is all you have to remember. Then we have the all bones except some bones of the skull and clavicle, endochondral ossification we have. Here you can see with this diagram how the bone starts ossification and its development. How the bone, here center of ossification started, and we have the hyaline cartilage, this hyaline cartilage, and these are the primary center of ossification. Then here cartilage matrix is there. We are going to get when it is cavitation of the hyaline cartilage within the cartilage model. Then formation of bone in the, that is we get hyaline cartilage in the first diagram. Second diagram, we have the cavitation. Uh, we are cartilage matrix we are going to see. Third one, blood vessels of periosteal buds we are going to have in the third diagram. That is a cavity inside that. Spongy bone formation we are going to see here. Then in the fourth one, we are going to get the, that is the secondary ossification center started epiphysis. Here we are going to get that they are present. And here second centers of ossification, epiphyseal blood vessel, as we are going to call blood vessel, nutrient blood vessels, blood nutrient artery, that is the blood supply. Then when bones are completely formed, articular cartilage is there, spongy bone, epiphyseal plate of cartilage, this is epiphyseal plate of cartilage, and this nutrient artery, which is divides into ascending and descending, supplying to the upper and lower part of the, that is the diaphysis. This is all ossification of the epiphysis when completed. Hyaline cartilage remains only in the epiphyseal plate. That is, you can see. This is a very important diagram for the ossification of bone. So this is all about the, you have to remember in this. And one which is a nutrient artery, it is a branch of the main artery of the region where the bone is situated. That region, main artery, one branch goes and supplies to the bone, and that we call as a nutrient artery. So that is one you should remember. How it travels, I have told. It nutrient artery, it runs in the obliquely in the cortex, enters into the medullary cavity, and it divides into a ascending and descending. Here in the cortex, medullary cavity obliquely enters, dividing into ascending, descending in the medullary cavity, ascending branch and descending branch, we are going to get it. So this is all about the, and we have separately branches which are received, that is the epiphyseal artery, metaphyseal artery, and we have nutrient artery, ascending, descending branch in the medullary cavity. Then I have told the next part, that is the where the nutrient artery, which is supplies all nutrition to the bone, which is long bones, you are going to get it. So almost all you have the here totally the ossification centers and blood supply of the long bone. So clinical anatomy, stage of healing, this is a fracture of bone. You have the blood and calcium deposition. New blood vessels are formed, spongy bone we are going to see. Then there is a healing of the fracture, bone remodeling, and remodeling of the bone takes place. Bone which is you have. Here you have the fracture lines where fracture of the spine and fracture of the lower end of tibia, fibula. That is all you can see here. And in this applied anatomy of the bone, you can remember fracture of the shaft of the tibia, upper condyle of the tibia, where you can see with the radiograph, X-ray you can identify, where you can see the epiphyseal fracture. This is a spiral where obliquely it is cuts the shaft. That is a spiral variety of, we get the fracture. Skull, we have here fracture, depressions we are going to get, and bend of the bone can be there. That is a green stick fracture we call. In the children's we have the cartilaginous more, they does not break, the elasticity is there, so that they have the green stick. They are going to have the totally not completely broken, but they are the bent and incompletely fractured. So those we call as a green stick fracture here. Skull bone depression hits on that depressions, and we get, that is we are going to see. So osteoporosis is characterized by the low bone mass. Bone reabsorption outpaces bone deposition, occurs most often in women after menopause. After the 45 years of age of in females, menopausal age we call, and bone disorders, that is osteoporosis. Bones loses its calcium and strength, so they become weaker. So that is we are going to call it osteoporosis. So this is all about the, you have to remember in the, then osteomalacia, we have bone are inadequately mineralized. Rickets we have, that is osteomalacia. We have the Paget's disease characterized by the excessive rate of bone deposition. Osteosarcoma, that is a cancer of the bone. This is all about the clinical anatomy of bone. So we have come across the first one, which is we have come across the what is the definition of the, that is the total ossification. What are the types of ossification, centers of ossification, gross structure of the long bone. We have come across epiphysis, diaphysis, metaphysis, nutrient artery, blood supply, and clinical anatomy of long bone. So this is all about the today is my lecture. Here we have completed the bone topic. So this is a very important part which is I have covered just now. Read it because it consists of the many questions: ossification, parts of paying bone, cross structure of bone, blood supply of bone, bone forming cells. So with this, I conclude my lecture of bone, and this is, you have to study total bone, that is whatever I have covered. So with this, take care, study hard, and these are the general anatomy